Heyo everybody, Haku here with my review for Ranking of Kings, or Ousama Ranking, whichever title you want to use. I kind of like Ousama Ranking more. I just generally go for the original Japanese titles most of the time. But if you've been following the channel, honestly, over the past few years, I haven't really watched any anime. Like other than like Fire Force, I really don't think I've watched anything until now. 2022, I'm trying my best to get back into anime, and as I watch new series, I'm gonna do reviews for them. So yeah, we're starting with Ousama Ranking, a series that I really loved. It might just immediately go up into like my top 10, even maybe, at least top 15 anime of all time. It's so good. It is really great. The opening 2 goes into like my top 3 openings of all time. It is absolutely incredible. But as far as the production quality goes, the visuals looked incredibly great. The music was really good. But I feel like the story and the characters are what I'm going to spend pretty much all of my time talking about. If you haven't watched season 1, spoiler warning for it, because I'm just going to be talking in depth about things that happened. Yeah, I feel like the way I'm going to organize this, rather than going episode by episode, I'm mostly going to talk in general about the story and go kind of character to character, because the characters were the real big sort of point of the story. It was really a show about learning to love yourself. Now, it wasn't just a show about that, but that was kind of the main plot point going on for the main characters. So it's going to be something really important to talk about throughout this. One issue I was having with the show towards the beginning was, I don't want to say fake out deaths necessarily, but like characters just didn't die. There was constantly like, oh god, they are probably dead, but then they weren't. And I actually ended up loving that about this show. In some ways, depending on how it was handled, for other shows I might end up hating that. But I loved it for this because that wasn't really what this show was about. It wasn't about who was going to live or die. It was about seeing each of the characters grow and change throughout the runtime of the season. And we really got that for the side characters. And again, anybody who's been around the channel for a bit knows that I love series where instead of focusing really tightly on one single main character, we have a nice large cast that all gets developed, or we spend a lot of time with side characters, or maybe there's just no single main character really. So I ended up loving how much this show focused on characters that weren't just Boji, as great as he was. Honestly, all the characters in the show were at least B tier, if not higher. Some like S+++ tier. Like I think my favorites were probably Despa and Healing. But I'll get into all of those. But even minor characters like Gigan, when Gigan first showed up, I was like, oh, he's just gonna be the random brute bad guy. There's not really gonna be much story for him. It seems like the first few episodes he was around, but then we got a story and it was incredible. Like even these little side characters had really great stories, and a lot of those characters just in general I feel like have barely just been set up. And if we get a season 2, I know the manga still continues after this, I feel like we're going to learn so much more about them. To stick with Gigan, he's one of those characters that I feel like is sort of just barely introduced, and we're going to see more of them as Boji starts building his own kingdom, as we get in more with what's happening with Desha. And I ended up really liking Desha a lot, so RIP to him, because he's taking whatever the king's deal is, and that is incredibly sketchy, but again, I'll get to that. So yeah, a lot of the characters that were introduced with the underworld in general, I feel like we're gonna need a lot more Kingbo, and we're gonna get a lot of that in the future. Again, stuff with Oken and stuff with Desha and Despa has definitely not been settled yet. And to me, I feel like it's pretty clear. We saw the one god guy in the flashback mention, the gods can't control the humans like they used to because of the way that civilization has advanced, so we need to find a new way to control them. seems pretty clear to me that the ranking of kings is that new way for the gods to control humanity. So yeah, Rip Dessa, I really, really liked him. I feel like he was a character that had to put up with some really heinous and terrible things, but it was made really, really clear that he was still a good guy and only put up with those things as much as he did because he had to stop even worse things from happening because of his father. And I think that's a really, really interesting story that I think and I hope we're going to see more of as we get more into the God stuff. And that's something that's been done poorly with a lot of other characters in the past. Like I always use as an example, there's this one character from Shingeki no Bahamut who is a king who basically like makes slavery legal and does like all this terrible stuff, but he's like he's doing it to stop some sort of apocalyptic scenario, and we're supposed to be like, oh wow, he's doing that for a good reason, he was always good at heart. And I'm like, no, he didn't need to do all that. Like, he went way above and beyond the terrible stuff. Like, and we never saw him like really, really remorseful, whereas I kind of feel like Dessa didn't really have a lot of choice in the matter, and we got to really visibly see how shaken up and upset he was about all the terrible things going on, but feeling like he had to put up with it. So again, I feel like I've seen that sort of character done very poorly in the past, so it's nice to see it done really well here. To talk about Hokuto and Mitsumata, there's not really much to say about them. I loved them. I really liked Hokuto. I actually thought he was going to play more of a role than he did. And Mitsumata just upset me every time he got hurt. I was like, stop it. Please stop hurting this character. But really, they didn't change too terribly much as characters. They were pretty consistent from beginning to end. They didn't have as much of an arc as some of the others. Boss Miranjo and Boji's mother were all really, really great tragic characters. It was really great to see Miranjo end up with a happy ending because I really, really liked Miranjo. We have Oken, who I feel like will eventually be saved. Again, I love the character. Was a great force of nature style of villain, antagonist. Not really quite sure what you would want to call Oken. Beben was a great guy from the start and really didn't change much. I really liked Beben. Apeas was a character that I was annoyed by more than most of the others, but I also really get the character. Because again, one of the big plot points was about learning to love yourself and have self-worth and self-value. And that was something that Apeas didn't have, and Miranjo instilled that within him. So he wanted to do everything he could for her. He was completely loyal to her as the person who gave him sort of a reason to go on, a will to, like somebody who inspired him to love himself. Domas was another kind of frustrating one, but I still liked him the entire way through. He really only wanted to help, he only wanted to be loyal, and he made a terrible mistake trying to kill Boji in doing so, but he was really remorseful for it. So again, he was a bit of a frustrating character, but I ended up still liking him. Doroshi was the most unexpected character, because we got to like the almost halfway point, and I'm like, this guy hasn't done anything. Like, compared to the other guys, he doesn't seem cool at all. We haven't seen him do anything. And then, oh boy, was I wrong, because he ended up just being the absolute best. I love Doroshi so much. And his story was about everyone being worthy of being protected. Everybody having worth. Everybody, like, deserving to be protected. Oh, it was so good. And then healing... We're getting into sort of the top 4 really sort of in-depth characters here that I'm going to go into. And that's going to be Healing, then Despa, then Boji, then Kage. I feel like that order kind of works best when it comes to the themes of the show. Healing was a story of motherly love that was really beautiful, but motherly love not feeling good enough or worthy enough. And because of that, it was kind of also one of those stories about how good intentions can result in sort of toxic or bad outcomes. because she always loved and wanted to try to, like, she was like, I can't be a mother to this boy who lost his mother, but I want to. I want to be a mom. And so she tried her best, but her best was trying to coddle Boji and be like, Boji can't do this, Boji can't do that because of his disabilities. And it was out of love for him, but it ended up hurting his self-esteem. It ended up her being the person who she realizes at the end of the series, she was the one who told him, oh, he can't do this, he can't live up to that. And her having to realize that she messed up there, and she messed up with Daida as well, because she really, really loved Daida, but she constantly told him, you need to protect Boji, you need to be a strong prince and a strong king to do this and that. And she ended up putting so much pressure on Daida that it led him to be hasty in trying to live up to what he thought he needed to be. I love Daida as well. I just side noting him, but I love Daida as well. But in the end, she learned to love and support her kids while also letting them be themselves and make their own decisions. And again, great character arc for her. She was, again, like my favorite along with Despa. Despa was a silly character at first, but then you realize that he's actually the perfect mentor for Boji, because Boji always had this ability and this capability, but he was always told that he was too weak, that his disabilities would hold him back. So what he needed was a mentor, a person to look up to, who loved himself to a comedic degree, who was always hyping himself up when he finds out he didn't really die, and he's like, I knew the handsome never truly die. It's so good. Like, Despa never tried to change Boji. He never tried to say, oh, you need to go get your strength back or whatever. He never tried to change who he was. He only pushed him to be the best person he could be as himself and to trust in others. It was just the perfect role model and the perfect mentor character to illustrate the point of Boji needing to learn, and Kage especially needing to learn to love himself, by giving them a mentor figure who does so to a comedic degree. Boji as a character was incredible. He was told he was weak, again, told that his disabilities would always hold him back, but he ended up throughout the course of the series taking the love that other people instilled in him and using that to move forward. Moving forward because Kage believed in him, because he had Mitsumata in his corner, because Beben was there for him, and it just kept growing and growing. And every time we would see him go up against a challenge, we would see Boji very, very often sort of shrink back a bit or feel like, oh crap, I can't handle this. And then we'd have a character stand up for him, and then Boji would be like, you know what? This person's standing up for me, whether it's whether it was Domas standing up for him towards the end, whether it was Kage always hyping him up, and whenever people put him down, it's like, no way, Boji can totally do this. It was somebody hyping him up and Boji being like, you know what? They're right, I can do this. And having to learn to break through all the stuff that had been instilled in him throughout his life of all these people looking down on him and laughing at him, and learning to say, you know what? I can do this. I can be kingly. He always had it in him from the beginning. He could always work hard, and he could always be smart enough, like what Despa did. And he could always be the strongest, but he needed to learn to accept that he could be, like, he was seeking his strength or whatever. Why don't I have strength towards the beginning? But in the end, he always had what it took to be the strongest. He just needed to learn, yeah, I've already got this. I've already got it. I just need to put in the work and get there. And then, finally, Kage, at the very end, I think is the most important, because even after Boji's had his full character arc, even after Boji has been lifted up and pushed up and learned, you know what, I can do this, I can be the king, I can be the strongest, Kage still thought, I'm not good enough to be this guy's friend. I'm not good enough to belong around royalty, and left in the end. Kage needed to be taught in the end, in the final episode, like we finished all the combat and stuff, and the final episode was about Boji reaching out and being there for Kage, the same way that Kage was there for him, to show him that he was worthy enough, that he did have worth, that he needed to learn that he was good enough to be Boji's friend. He spent the entire show, Kage spent the entire show like instilling love in Boji, standing up for Boji, pushing Boji forward, lifting Boji up. And in the end, we get to see that he still does not feel that way about himself because of his species or whatever, the shadow people, because of the way that he's been treated, or mistreated rather, actually. He still doesn't have that worth in himself, and he needed to learn that even though he worked so hard to lift his friend up, he was never lifting himself up or believing in himself, and he needed Boji to return the favor. And that was so great because we have the entire series Kage building Boji up, and then in the last episode Boji says, "You're right here too," and it's so good. It's so good to show him his value and his meaning. And that all goes into sort of the quote from Healing in the last episode, where Healing says something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing here, "A lucky charm is something that you protect because you believe that it protects you." Like Kage is somebody that Boji needs to be there for and protect, and he's been there protecting all season because Kage protects him. He needs to lift up Kage because Kage lifts him up. It's so good. So I guess the sort of message in the end is to learn to love yourself, to learn to trust others, and to love the people that lift you up, to lift up others who lift you up. It's such a good show. It's so good. And I haven't really got that sort of like fairy tale kids cartoon, almost like moral of the story kind of thing from a show in a while, where it was like there were other things that were really important to the story, but that was really what the first season was telling through the main characters. So yeah, I don't know, not the best review maybe. I didn't go like super in detail into like events happening, just talked about general themes for each of the characters and how much I loved them, just gushed over how incredible this show was. So yeah, maybe not the most incredible review, maybe not the style that I'm going to use for all of these, but I felt like when I wanted to talk about Ranking of Kings, that's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the characters, and I wanted to talk about the message that the characters sort of embody. So yeah, it was really good. If you haven't watched it and we're watching my review, I guess it wasn't super spoilery. Go watch it. It's incredible. I can't wait for a season 2 if there's going to be one. I think it's incredible though that Wit Studio, I believe, did this. That they took a manga that, if you've read it, is like fairly like simple and bare bones in its art, and was just like, they took inspiration from like old school cartoons and said, we're going to make this just an incredible work of art. And it was so good. This is what a great adaptation looks like, I feel like, because it didn't just adapt the visuals and everything well, because that looked gorgeous, and that's a sign of a very good adaptation. Like, if I'm reading something, I want it to look really good when it gets made into an anime, but also to do the story so well is so good. And like I said, there's still so much more that could potentially come with the God stuff. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But yeah, that is it for my review of Season 1 of Ranking of Kings. Like I said, as I watch more stuff, I'm going to do more reviews. But either way, that is it for now. Thank you for watching. Like if you did like the video, comment down there too. Tell me what you thought of this series, what you thought of my thoughts on it and all of that. Subscribe for more anime, manga, manhwa, much more on the channel. Follow on Twitter if you want. If you want a link to the Discord server, it's free and open for anyone. Just ask and I can give you a link. And if you want to help support the channel on Patreon, it's patreon.com/Haku of the Tubes, or a link will be in the description. But either way, that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.